His divine grace, mercy, Bhaktivedanta Smarad, Srila Prabhupada, Ida, Lord Prahladananda, Slava Kupani Bhaktivedanta, Shri Guru Ishkina. Namaste, Saraswati. Om Agyanajivadandasya Gyananjaya Sulakaya Tatsunulikam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Vidati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shigro Shiyutapatakabalam Shigro Vaishnavamscha Shirupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vidam Tam Sajivam Sarvaitam Savadutam Vrajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabando Dugatare Gopesha Gopikakanta Prahladananda Swami Taptakamsha Gorangi Radhe Vindameshwari Vrishabham Sutyadevi Pranamami Hripriye Panchadava Dravyascha Kripa Sindhu Vrayascha Padidam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jai Jai Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. I'm going to read from the Srimad Bhagavatam today, Canto 3, Chapter 25, text number 25. I guess we won't be able to repeat it. How many have a phone that they? Phone. Anyhow, I'll just read the verse. You probably heard this before. Satam prasangamama virya samvido bhavanti rekarna rasayanam kata taj joshanat ashvavarga varmini shararatir bhakti anukramishati. Translation and brought by His Divine Grace A.C. Prahladananda Swami Prabhupada. Ramurti, let me know if I'm going too quickly. They go rather slow.
It's okay. If you read too quick, I will say it. I can translate simultaneously.
Okay. In the Association of Pure Devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and to the heart. The cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotional service begins. For what? The process of advancing Krishna consciousness and devotional service is described here. The first point is that one must seek the association of persons who are Krishna conscious and who engage in devotional service. Without such association, one cannot make advancement. Simply by theoretical knowledge or study, one cannot make any appreciable advancement. One must give up the association of materialistic persons and seek the association of devotees, because without the association of devotees, one cannot understand the activities of the Lord. Generally, people are unconvinced of the impersonal feature of the absolute truth because they do not associate with devotees. They cannot understand that the absolute truth can be a person and have personal activities. This is a very difficult subject matter, and unless one has personal understanding of the absolute truth, there is no meaning to devotion. Service of devotion cannot be offered to anything impersonal. Service must be offered to a person. Non-devotees cannot appreciate Krishna consciousness by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam or any other Vedic literature where the activities of the Lord are described. They think that these activities are fictional, manufactured stories, because spiritual life is not explained to them in the proper mood. To understand the personal activities of the Lord, one has to seek the association of devotees. By such association, when one contemplates and tries to understand the transcendental activities of the Lord, the path to liberation is open, and he is free. One whose firm faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes fixed, and his attraction for association with the Lord and the devotees increases. Association with devotees means association with the Lord. The devotee who makes this association develops a consciousness for rendering service to the Lord, and then being situated in the transcendental position of devotional service, he gradually becomes perfect. So the verse again. Sitam prasangam virya samvido bhavanti rakarna rasayana kata tajdoshvar ash vapavarga vartmani shadaratir bhaktir anukramishati. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced in the path of liberation, and thereafter he is free. His attraction becomes fixed, and real devotion and devotional service begins. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Buddhaya Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Dhanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shnivadi Bhasketyaje Santarane. Here, Lord Kapila Dev is glorifying association with devotees. Our first business is to learn how to associate with the devotees, so we can hear from them. Without the proper attitude towards the devotees, it's not possible to hear transcendental knowledge from them. For that reason, we have etiquette. Sometimes people make light of etiquette, but without the proper etiquette, then there is no question of having the proper attitude for hearing. Without being able to hear with the proper etiquette, then one cannot actually understand anything. Generally, the process is this. We try to hear something. So that trying to hear something is a beginning. That is trying to hear something from the right source. Now, we may not have a perfect attitude. Matter of fact, that's what it means to be conditioned. If we were not conditioned, then we have a perfect attitude. Just like iron, when it's rusty, does not become attracted to the magnet. When the iron is not rusty, then it's automatically attracted to the magnet. So the first business is to clean the rust off the magnet. But then someone must admit that the iron is rusty. Otherwise, one will not bother to clean it. If one declares that my iron is always pure, and therefore you put the iron next to the magnet, and you say, see how quickly it gets attracted. But it's not naturally attracted, it's just artificially put next to the magnet with the declaration that it's now attracted. Similarly, when we're here, we have to understand we have to make an effort to hear. What that effort is has to be explained. In other words, the beginning of devotional service, we're supposed to learn how to hear. And part of that is to learn how to hear means to how to develop the proper attitude of hearing. So Krishna says it should be submissive. Because without hearing submissively, we can't hear. Now, how do we learn how to hear submissively? What are the ingredients? One is that we have to believe that what the speaker is saying actually has some relationship to my existence, to my life, something that I'm interested in. Now, basically speaking, everyone is actually interested in the basic principles of Krishna consciousness, to learn how to become happy forever. Who's not interested in that? Is anyone here interested in how to become miserable forever? We don't have to hear about that. It comes along with material nature. We already have good experience of that. But to learn how to become happy forever, that requires some faith. In other words, everyone, whoever they are, they're trying to become happy forever. The question is, what do they believe will make them happy? That's all. Everyone's looking for the same thing. It's only a question, what do we believe will actually give us those three things? What do we believe is actual knowledge? When we say the word knowledge, we see scientists in white uniforms looking through a microscope, trying to figure out what's going on. Or we think of someone, writing mathematical formulas on a blackboard, or how to fix a car, how to program a computer. This is what we think of knowledge. But spiritual knowledge takes us into a different realm. Unfortunately, due to the nature of material existence, we hear about that realm, and we momentarily, or for some time, we become attracted, and then we lose that inspiration, that attraction. Why is that? Because that's the nature of the world we're in. That's how this material nature works. Or as Prabhupada, when someone asked Prabhupada, why do so many advanced devotees leave the movement? Prabhupada said, advanced devotees, they don't leave the movement. And then Prabhupada also said, don't be surprised who leaves, be surprised who stays. So that developing that attraction begins with developing some faith in what we're talking about. We may not know Krishna that intimately. We may not even know the Super Soul who's right in our heart that intimately. We may not even know ourselves at all. We may not even believe so much that we're eternal. But those are the three things we constantly have to be reminded of. Therefore, in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that we're eternal. Now, Prabhupada, if you listen to his lectures, he never left that out as a reminder. Because that's the basis. Unless we believe we're eternal, then what are we doing here? Now we may be chanting Hare Krishna, and sometimes we're in Vaikuntha, and sometimes we're in a dry desert in Egypt somewhere, suffering from thirst. So when we're in Vaikuntha, feeling bliss, when we're chanting Hare Krishna, we think we've made it, we're there, and the next moment we're back in the desert again. This chanting doesn't work. Therefore, that's what Krishna says about developing enough faith that we actually can live part of our life, at least in spiritual life. That we actually believe that we're eternal. And then the next thing is to understand what takes away our eternality. That's what we're supposed to hear about. In other words, if we're eternal, then we can at least become peaceful when we realize we're eternal. Otherwise, it's not possible to be peaceful. And if we're not peaceful, how can we hear anything? Not anything very deep. Because if we're not peaceful, we're always worried about something in the past that happened or something in the future. Therefore, we're not aware of anything that's going on in the present. What to speak of even a speaker who's speaking about Krishna or about Krishna consciousness. Now, the speaker can give us some topics that we might be interested in. Krishna in the bushes with the gopis. Well, something interesting. Something I can relate to. Something I have some interest in. And then the speaker, if he dares to switch to the eternality of the self, oh my God, the same old boring thing about I'm eternal. I've heard it a million times, I don't believe it. It's just a boring thing. And then if he switches to a more profound topic, we even get more disturbed. The super soul. Oh my God, there's a guy inside me. You can't tell me there's a guy. Nonetheless, he has 4 arms. And he has a concha wheel and lotus flower. I can't see any of that. Sitting on a lotus flower in my heart. I don't see things. When the doctors opened me up, there was no lotus flowers, just a lot of blood. And then we get into Krishna. All right, Krishna, there's something a little more interesting. Add the gopis, and finally to get some topic that makes some sense to us. Normal guy with some normal girls. But actually, to get liberation from our anxieties, to come to the present, where we can actually hear, we have to hear, as Prabhupada writes in the 2nd canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, principally we have to hear about Krishna's pastimes in the material energy. Otherwise, if we don't hear about Krishna's pastimes in the material energy, then we'll think that this material energy that we see around us is something different from the spiritual world. And that's why we live in the material world, because we think it's a material world. And we live as it's the material world. Because we believe we're living in the material world, therefore we believe we're supposed to have part of our existence is supposed to be material life. And then there's something called Krishna consciousness and devotional service, whatever it may be, it's like a separate existence. They have Dr. Heckle and Mr. Hyde. So in the temple, suddenly we get a little halo around ourselves. We float a little bit, and then when we walk outside, 2 little horns come up. Kind of tucking our tail a little bit. What do you think we're supposed to have 2 different identities? We say, well, that was a great lecture, I really liked the pastimes he was told a few jokes. I kept awake for most of it. It was a really good lecture, whatever they told me. Can't remember what it was about, but it was really good. Now the first thing to do is hear about the eternality of the self and why we're bewildered by the illusory energy. Why we're identified with this gross and subtle body, which we take as completely normal. We're like the little bird in the cage. They have a little bird in the cage, and the bird gets out of the cage. The master opens the cage, the little bird walks out, looks around, gets afraid, and gets back into the cage, and the master closes the cage, and the bird feels good, I'm protected again. So, to get out of the Bali concept of life, sometimes we allow that for a few seconds, then we get nervous. My God, this is too transcendental. Then we get back into our mature conception of life again. Back to normal life. I wonder what's for Prahladananda, what's this for Prahladananda? That's real important. Therefore, we have to learn the science of why we're becoming bewildered sometimes by the illusory energy, and what we can do to make progress to become less bewildered. And part of that is cause us to get some taste for transcendence, because it's not just a question of negating material existence, it's a question of also developing the proper mindset so we can experience spiritual existence. In every single field of advancement in the material world, the first criteria is to become peaceful, believe it or not. Whether you take the science of yoga, the science of astrology, the science of Tai Chi, and any of all these disciplines, the whole aim is just to become peaceful, relaxed. Not falling asleep, but consciously relaxed. So relaxed that we become relaxed in a way that we're not distracted, we're actually conscious of what's really going on, because we're no longer disturbed. Dhruva Maharaj did that by, first of all, fasting. He didn't worry about what was for prasadam. He knew exactly what he was going to eat for the first month. Every third day he ate kapita fruit. So he wasn't worried. And the next month he knew exactly what he was going to eat. The dry leaves that fell from the tree. And he wasn't hankering for them. Of course he may have been a little hungry, so they tasted a lot better than he usually would have. But his mind was peaceful. He knew today I'm going to eat some dry leaves. Hopefully they fall from the tree today. And then the third month he drank a little water, because it wasn't bottled water. It was really good water. But it was every ninth day. He didn't have to think about it. He didn't have to go to the store. He didn't go to the drug and look around, see what's on the shelf. Wow, chocolate. I'm not supposed to eat it, but a little bar. Never killed anyone. He didn't have to go through the whole thing. He just looked around and saw the water and said, well, it's available anyhow. Well, the leaves stopped falling. There's no more kapita fruit. So I made a vow, no. And at the same time, he was chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. He was actually, every month, it became more and more powerful, the mantra, because he wasn't distracted. He wasn't surfing the internet. He wasn't on Facebook.
No big.
All he did was have some water for the third month, and Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and he had some deity he was worshiping. So, since he was not trained, he was 5 years old when the whole thing started. He wasn't distracted. Oh my God, how did I get into this mess? I better write to my friends on Facebook and tell them all the austerities I'm going through. I feel hungry, my stomach hurts. You get I got 5 likes from that. That's No, he wasn't distracted because he started out clean. He didn't know anything. I remember when I joined the movement, 1970, I was sent to open the temple in Miami, Florida. I was in another temple which was in Buffalo, which was 3,000 miles away in upstate New York. And they sent me down to Florida to open a temple. So I had joined I was a college student when I joined, and the amount of austerity was rather minimal that we had learned in our childhood. Of course, we went to camp and we learned, as a Boy Scout and things like that, but that was like the maximum. But when I joined the movement, we didn't really know what to expect, because all we knew is that there was nothing we were supposed to expect. We were sleeping on the floor. I was living in a shack. The temple was actually a shack, a railroad shack. So, it was expected. We had a hand in our karmi clothes, and we put on these. We didn't even have dhotis at that time. We had actually bed sheets. I went to the store and bought some cloth, dyed it, and we cut it up and we made dhotis out of it. So then when I got down to Miami, then I didn't exactly, we didn't know what the movement was all about with this heart. Of course, we had some experience in Krishna consciousness, but exactly what to expect we didn't know. So when I was there, when I arrived, there were 5 sannyasis. When I finally found what they were, in a bookstore. And there was Vishnu Jan Maharaj, there was, at that time, there was Prahladananda Maharaj, Gargamuni Maharaj, Subal Maharaj, and their servants and myself. I guess there were 4 sannyasis. And that night we had milk and some bananas. So I thought it was perfectly normal. Till the next day when they all left. Except for they all went to different places. And Gargamuni Maharaj at that time and myself, and the servant and myself, we didn't have a place to stay. We were living in the park, in our sleeping bed. Which would have been all right because it's Miami, Florida. This so happens it was getting to be winter. And it gets cold there too. Cooler. And we didn't have anything to eat, which was also a problem. Except that Gargamuni allowed us to have, we'd go out, I'd go out and collect during the day, distributing back to Godheads. And then, but before we went out, we cooked on the grills, chapatis, karmi grills, of course. They were cooking other things, we were cooking chapatis. And he cooked apple chutney. We'd have a little kirtan, some hippies would come by, and Gargamuni Maharaj would give a lecture. We'd hand out the chapatis, and he put a little bit of, in each chapati, put a little bit of apple chutney that he'd cooked. And we'd hand them out, and then when they were all done, we got our meal for the whole day, which was 2 chapatis with a little bit of apple chutney in it. And then after the hippies were done, we could go out and search and see if they left anything. We can eat that too. And that was our meal for the day, the whole day. So after a couple of weeks of that, I didn't notice I was getting a little thin. Because then we go out and book distribution. And if we came back on time, if we came back before the store closed, which is like twice a week, and we got 1/4 of a pint of sour cream and 2 bananas to eat, just to make sure we didn't starve to death. So that went on for some time, and then finally they told me they wanted me to join Vishnu Jan Maharaj and Srinath, his name was, in Houston, to hitchhike another 3,500 kilometers in the deep south at that time, which was not the most liberal part of America. That was the part that were the hanging blacks from the trees, for anyone that looked a little strange. So, getting there meant to hitchhike with a dhoti. That's all we had was 1 dhoti. And Gargamuni decided he'd buy me because it usually takes 3 or 4 days to hitchhike, my meals for there. So we went to the health food store, and he bought my meal for the 4-day trip. 1/4 of a pound of fried chickpeas.
1/4
Of a pound of fried chickpeas. So I didn't like chickpeas myself. So I wasn't really that excited about eating them, especially on a 4-day trip. But the health food store owner, he looked at me and he, somehow or another, he felt compassionate. And he donated 2 date balls. Date balls. Balls made out of dates. So as soon as we left the store, I ate them because I was actually feeling a little hungry. And then I started the trip, and that lasted for 4 days. We had many exciting adventures, like being picked up. One lady picked me up. The first person picked me up. Actually, the first person picked me up was drunk, and he was going to the wrong side of Florida. He was driving like 120 kilometers an hour. The next person who picked him up was a lady. She was driving at least in the right direction. And then it was time to take rest, and she invited me to her house. She said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you." So that went on. The next ride, then when we finally got another ride, no one would pick me up. Especially we got out of Florida, and the other states were even more, we could say, conservative. So I was walking, and it started to rain, really rain hard. And the only one who would pick me up was going the wrong direction. So just to get out of the rain, I got into that car. And then finally, after a few more days, I made it to Louisiana. And then the police picked me up.
Oh no!
And then the police said exactly this. They said, "Hey boy, why are you wearing that dress?" And I didn't know it for 3 days, like a couple of weeks earlier, or sometime earlier, Vishnu Maharaj and Srinath were picked up by the police in Louisiana also, put into jail. So I guess they got tired of putting us in jail, so they let me go. Finally, I arrived in Houston, Texas, after like 4 days. I remember also I actually got 2 bananas on the way. That's all I ate. Some hippies picked me up, and they gave me some bananas, and I said, "Well, I'll offer them to Krishna." So I offered all the bananas, and they were eating them, and said, "Wow, these are really fantastic bananas. They taste like they were organic." Anyhow, I arrived, and some people picked me up because they thought I was a Buddhist, otherwise no one would pick me up. And they drove me to the Buddhist temple in Houston. It wasn't where I was trying to go to. And I didn't know where I was supposed to go to. And I was calling up Sesrup Maharaj in Boston, who was my GBC, who told me to go there. And I had no money, because we never had money. We didn't have clothes either, we had nothing. So I called him up, and he wouldn't accept the collect call. Finally he accepted it after some try. And then he told me where the devotees were. And it was Vishnu Maharaj and Srinath, and they were living in a garage apartment upstairs. And I got there in time for Prahladananda, and they gave me 7 chapatis.
Wow.
So I thought this was for all of us, because I never had, in a few weeks or so, I'd never eaten more than 2 chapatis in a day. So I started to divide the chapatis up, and he said, no, that's right, you can eat all 7. So that was the beginning of, coming back to life again. But it seemed completely normal. It's not like we were complaining, how did this ever happen to me, that this, because I had nothing to compare it with. That was the beginning of Christian consciousness. There are no stories about anyone falling down, or opulent sannyasis or anything like that. That's all we knew. That's whatever Krishna gave us, that's what we had to accept. So Dhruva Maharaj, he was 5 years old, He wasn't going to complain. I'm out here in the forest. I came here voluntarily. My spiritual master, he told me to stay here, go through these austerities and worship this deity and chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Because Dhruva Maharaj's mind was clean. He didn't have all these past experiences to look back on and say, oh my God, I remember the time I was in the palace and everything was so nice, Played games with the kids and, Prahladananda was, I'm here out in the forest, what is water? My God, I'm going to die. It's good water though. But I only thought every night, hey, this is too much. I quit, I'm going back to mommy, help me. I hope I can find her, my God, this is too much. No, he went through it. Of course, he was a Kshatriya, and he was completely determined. He was going to get what he wanted. And whatever it took, he was going to get. So he was completely determined. So he had many advantages that we have. Our main disadvantage is we've been trained up wrong from the very beginning. We've been spoiled and fed all kinds of nonsense. And that's all we understood at that time. That's all we had knowledge of, and then naturally we had faith in those things. In spite of the fact it was all nonsense. I remember as a student at the university, even in high school, we were studying physics. And we learned that in 1920, wave light was a wave. And then 1940, it was a particle. And then 1960, they discovered it was a wavicle. And I couldn't, get my head around it. What is it? Is it popsicle? Is it wavesicle? What is it? But the speculative method was considered to be scientific. In America, you learn how great the presidents were. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, whatever. You learn how great these presidents are. They were Mahajans. Yeah, that's how you look at them, you salute the flag. You put your hand on your heart. The Super Bowl is not there, the American flag is there. Because when I got into high school, they decided to train everyone up to become a communist. So that was the beginning of American indoctrination into communism. So books started to come out how the Americans are actually rascals, how they came in just for economic reasons, they killed the Indians, etc. So they developed another kind of faith. They started to develop another kind of faith in the Americans. It was like, if you want to be confused, just come to the material world and Kali Yuga. But still, you think, well, now finally we're actually making progress. We're finding out the truth, what's really going on. That this really makes sense. Cowboys were not always the good guys. The Indians could have been, some of them could have been, good also, who knows? We came and invaded it, killed the Indians. They were kind of like sitting around their teepees. And just like Thanksgiving, eventually you learn it was actually, Thanksgiving means they went out and killed all the Indians. That's how they give thanks. Massacre the Indians, they give thanks. Thank you, God, for the bullets. So then you really start getting indoctrinated to that. You think you're actually learning something. So that's modern world. Actually, people think that they're making some progress or indoctrinated, but actually they don't know anything. All they're doing is being filled up with more and more contradictions and more bewildering information, and they think they're making progress. Disrespecting authorities because they're all cheaters and liars, disrespecting your country, disrespecting your family because they're all brainwashed, etc., etc. So therefore eventually one thinks faith means losing faith in everything. and just taking drugs to get, as Prabhupada said, that's one of the stages of Maya. First, you believe that the world is here to enjoy, and then you learn that the world is here to get out of. You go from materialism to Buddhism. And then you learn the whole thing is nonsense. No one knows anything. The whole thing is just take some intoxication, get out of here. Get out of your mind. Because the only thing you do is agitate your mind here. Therefore, for ourselves, we've been trained up in materialism, voidism, and impersonalism and voidism. Therefore, it's difficult to actually be peaceful, hear about Krishna. Hear about Krishna means you hear about ultimately what to do so that we can actually hear about Krishna. If we just chant Hare Krishna with, quote, the proper attitude, then we experience Krishna's presence. And we become blissful, because Krishna is all blissful. But we can't hear about hearing with the proper attitude unless we have the proper attitude. So at least a little bit of desire has to be there in order to even hear about how to develop the proper attitude. And part of that means that we should learn the science of how to develop the proper attitude. If we hear about Krishna's pastimes, we may become entertained, and they're purifying, just to hear about Krishna's pastimes. But unless we learn how to hear, then we won't even be able to hear the holy name. Because there's a progression from the name to the form, to the associates, to the qualities, to the pastimes. We can't actually hear Krishna's pastimes in the right way unless we hear the holy name in the right way. But we can't hear about the holy name. Of course, the holy name, wherever we start out with, it'll help us progress, as long as we're not chanting like the Mayavadis. So the first thing we learn is that God, Krishna, is a person, and there's no difference between him and his name. And a little bit of faith should be awakened that if we chant Hare Krishna, we're actually associating with Krishna, as long as we don't do it for too many years offensively. You know, our typical shnick, ram, day, hey, kitty. And then this thing doesn't work, you know. Whether I chant 16 rounds or 160 rounds, I get the same effect. No effect whatsoever. The only thing I get is I get hungry from so much moving my lips. So, unless we hear how to chant offenselessly, and make some effort to do it, then everything else will just be entertainment in terms of Krishna consciousness. Or as Prabhupada mentions in this verse, the Mayavadis hear, the impersonalists hear about Krishna, but because they don't hear from the right source with the right attitude, they just think it's some kind of fairy tale. So we also, because we're in Maya, and because we're afflicted by Maya, impersonalism and materialism, although we're aspiring to become devotees, but there's some material contamination there. Therefore, when we hear about Krishna, especially Krishna's pastimes in the internal energy, there's a tendency to think they're exaggerations, they're stories, they're fairy tales, because we don't have enough transcendental experience to actually experience what's going on in that hearing process. Just like when we chant Hare Krishna, we don't even have enough transcendental credit to be in ecstasy every time we chant. So what to speak when we hear these pastimes and we're not in ecstasy, we're not actually there, then we just automatically will take them as something, hearing this as something ordinary, equated to what we can equate it to, our own mundane pastimes. Or as one lady was going, as you probably heard, she had a goat. I've told this story before. A goat whose name was Radha. And one day her beautiful goat died. And since Radha was the most precious thing in her life, her dear goat, she began to lament and cry. But someone told her that there was going to be a Bhagavad Saptaha, and they were going to talk about Radha and Krishna. So she thought, well, they're going to talk about my goat, so I'll go. So she went to the Bhagavad Saptaha. After 7 days and nights, she heard about Radha and Krishna. And the speaker had a beard, and his beard looked exactly like her goat's beard, who had died. So every time she heard him say Radha, immediately tears would flow from her eyes, remembering her dead goat. And every time she looked at the speaker, immediately tears would flow from her eyes, remembering her dead goat. So she was very emotional for 7 days, hearing the Bhagavad Saptaha. And at the end of the Bhagavad Saptaha, the speaker came up to her and paid her full obeisances in front of everyone. He said, "Oh great lady, oh great sadhu, can I become your disciple? You're so emotionally ecstatic every time I say Radha and Krishna, I immediately burst out in tears of ecstasy. And every time you look at me, just an ordinary speaker of the Bhagavatam, tears come from your eyes." She said, "You don't understand. You know, every time I look at you, you remind me of my goat, Radha." And I was very much in love with her. And her name was Radha, so every time you said Radha, immediately I remember her. And I became very emotional. Of course, I began to cry. So we have to do the same thing for Krishna's name. The Krishna's name should remind us of something, not something, whatever it is. Shnik, shnik, ram, ram, hey, hey, kitty, kitty, kitty. Some cat comes by. Kitty, kitty. No, it should remind us of something. So unless we're practiced to see this world in relation to Krishna, then our minds are going to become distracted from it. Of course, we haven't been taught like that. We've been taught to see this world in relation to our sense gratification. So naturally, when we look around, we get easily distracted from things. But when we learn to see it from the Bhagavad Gita's point of view, and the only way we can do that is to accept that everything here, for instance, belongs to Krishna, and then whatever we can utilize it for the service of Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. Then we will start to see everyone and everything in relation to Krishna, and we won't be distracted away from Krishna anymore, thinking that there's something here either to enjoy or someone to enjoy, or we think that there's something to be afraid of in the material world, something that's going to possibly harm it. So those two things. People are easily distracted by fear or by desire. But if we become aware of our Krishna, when we see things, when things remind us of Krishna, by utilizing them in Krishna's service, then gradually we become aware of our real identity, and that's called liberation. And then there's no more fear. And when there's no more fear and distraction, then we can steadily think about Krishna, and then we can experience more and more ecstasy, the forms, the qualities, the pastimes, the associates. Everything becomes real, not just a theory, but experience. And we become real. And then our life becomes perfect. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj, for a very nice lecture, and especially about these things that were happening back then. I read the Radha Damodar Vilas that Vaisakhi Prabhu wrote, so there was much about those times, and also about that temple. And perhaps maybe we could say something else.
Oh, we can say
about Vishnujan Swami. He was, at least to me, a great inspiration when I read that book about that dedication.
Oh, okay, one thing, because Vishnu Maharaj, he loved Simply Wonderfuls.
Yeah, I know that they were driving to the prison and they ate it all up.
He ate them all.
He ate it.
He did that regularly every time.
Okay.
I'd make the Simply Wonderfuls, especially the strawberry ones. And on the way there, he'd always eat them before we got to our program. He had a good appetite.
I have a question. We spoke yesterday about COVID in Buddhism.
Well, let's some questions about the class, hopefully. Someone has a question about the class, otherwise we get distracted. Yes?
You said that Prabhupada said that if somebody left ISKCON, the movement, then he is not advanced. But did he mean fall down or leave for another institution? Because
Advanced? What do you mean by advanced?
You-
The devotee is saying that he was surprised that such advanced devotees left the movement. And Prabhupada said advanced devotees don't leave the movement, because we don't know what advanced is. As Prabhupada said in 77, when all you know is a castor bush, which is a fairly big bush, all you know is then you think that it's a big tree.
Can you repeat it, Maharaj? I couldn't follow.
There's
The last sentence.
castor bush. You know what castor is? It's the seeds. It has these seeds that they're really bitter, cleansing seeds. So it's a bush. So Prabhupada said, in the absence of a big tree, a castor bush looks big. So for ourselves, when we're relatively not so advanced, anyone who's relatively more advanced than we are seems very advanced. But we don't really know what actually advancement is. Real advancement is. Ultimate Uttama advancement is. But we don't even know what liberation is. Because we don't have that experience, that's all. All we can do is see who's more advanced than we are. And of course, if we want to come to their state of advancement, we can learn from them. But we also we want to come to the topmost stage of advancement. We also, even the person who's on the intermediate stage or trying to be on the intermediate stage, everyone has to take advantage, ultimately, of the topmost devotee. Because that's how everyone learns. Ultimately, Krishna.
But how can we say, if somebody left for Babaji, is it like for sure that he is not advanced? Like some
I'm
people...
not the super soul, I can't tell you. Anything else? Yes.
Maharaj, you said you have to be peaceful to. What means peaceful? You have first some bigger realization.
We don't know what peaceful is, it's just a word to it. Peaceful means when you chant Hare Krishna, you can actually hear. That's peaceful for us. Man has to elevate himself by his own mind, not degrade himself. The mind is a friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. So what is that? Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nishoshiti Nikamshiti Samapsarveshu Bhuteshu Madbhakti Lavate Puram. When no longer hankers and laments. How do we know that? We can see all living entities as spiritual beings. I'm not hankering and lamenting. Then we look around. We don't realize how subtle hankering and lamenting can be. It all manifests itself in our relationships with others. We hanker to take advantage of people, and we lament the fact we can't do it, that they're taking advantage of us. So that's material existence. So unless we give that up, this acting in the material world as a false ego, on the basis of the false ego, and act in pure devotional service, then there's no question of being peaceful. There'll always be the element of acting under false ego. Therefore, putting on a show in our delusional state based upon our false ego. These are called upadis. Acting as a male or a female, acting as an American or a Bosnian or a Croatian or all these acts we put on the basis of our false ego. Till one comes to the utilizing whatever we have in Krishna service, including our positions in this material world, then we can't be peaceful. Because what's the final goal of being a male? You have to leave the body, you may come back as a dog. You may be a female dog. So, whereas if there's no final goal, even if you come back as a female dog, then next lifetime, who knows? You'll have to come back as, maybe if you're a pious female dog, you come back as a monkey. There's no final goal, it's just going up and down. The only real peace is when we're acting as Krishna's servant, because then there's a final goal. Anything else? Well, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Lord Premanande.